on the last day of the conference. That's great. What hopefully you're here as well to learn a little bit about is secure and scalable PeopleSoft. And sensitive and high volume deployment case studies. What I'll go through today on the agenda, I am very confident we should be able to keep us all on schedule and maybe get out a little bit early here. I'll start on some intros, and I think as well that with a group this size, we might be able to do a little bit of introductions of yourselves as well, and that way we can get a little bit of feel of kind of where folks are coming from in terms of their roles and type of environment that you might be able to apply these alternate architectures that we'll be covering today for security and scalability, and also you'll see perhaps some other drivers applications as well. Largely, the presentation today will go over some use cases, including some in the federal government and commercial spaces as well, and that'll kind of dovetail really into what might be some other use cases that perhaps you and your organizations might be able to leverage the same kind of features. In terms of intro, my name's Kirk, and I work for Smart ERP Solutions. We are a Oracle partner and made up of a lot of former PeopleSoft folks. So myself, I used to work in people tools, product strategy, and also in corporate business development areas. We're headquartered in Pleasanton, California, so we didn't go very far. We went about 2 blocks from where the Pleasanton office of Oracle, where they still do the PeopleSoft development there, and we still have a lot of friends there. I also in previous jobs worked in the defense industry, and it was a very kind of highly secure environment there. And I think you'll see kind of touch upon in one of the use cases, particularly in the federal government use cases, where some of the kind of security needs that I have worked in previously as well can apply to these alternate architectures. So for a quick introduction, we don't need you don't need to go back 10, 15 years like we did in security clearances for federal jobs and that sort of thing, but it'd be great if we could get a quick feel, particularly of your environment. Oh, hey, I'm Joe from Acme Corp, and we have PeopleSoft 9.2 HCM versus financials or what have you, because you'll see it doesn't really matter if it's a HCM or financials, or maybe you have HCM and financials. So it would be great. Maybe we could start on this side of the room. If you could please give a quick intro of your space, your background, your organization.
I'm Chris Hacker. I work for Navy Personnel Command out of Bellingham, Tennessee. We're moving to PeopleSoft 9.2 for our global payroll system for the United States Navy. So the management handles their stuff.
That's right. That's as many of us know, that's a tiny project, isn't it? It's like 60 days max, right? To go through that. Very good. Thank you. Back over here.
I'm Sheila Denham, I'm the manager for the we're on PeopleSoft 9.2.
Okay, healthcare.
HCM and finance.
Both HCM and finance. Wonderful, wonderful. Welcome.
Brett Huntington, I'm a technical analyst with Temple Health in Philadelphia. We're on PeopleSoft 9.1, getting ready for our new upgrade.
Very good. Welcome. Thank you. We're back there.
My name is Charles. I work for the Department of Treasury. We're at 9.1 and working for the 9.2. We're one of the personnel retirement systems we're using.
Very good. That's another kind of federal government area. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Cliff. I work with there in the Department of Navy. We're on 9.2, looking at going to global payroll.
Very good. Very good. All right. Thank you.
Roger, I work at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, so we're associated with a lot of federal compliance stuff as well in Washington State. I manage the HR training and procurement systems, so we have ELM, HCM, and FSCM. We're on 9.1 for HCM and FSCM, and we're still on 9.0 for ELM, but we are in the process for
we're on another kind of a federal space there.
Yeah.
And in the back corner, please.
Diana, I work at the University of Rhode Island. We are on 8.9 for HR and financials.
Okay, that's a higher ed HR and financials. Thank you. Over to this side in the back, please.
Yeah, my name is Paul. I work for Ingersoll Rand. We're on 9.0, with 9.2.
Very good. All right, thank you. Over this side in the corner.
Ron, I work at Collin County, Texas. We're on HCM 9.2, 854 tools.
Okay, that's HCM, another kind of public sector. Very good. And next row up over here.
John Ladon, UniFirst Corporation. I'm the manager of all the PeopleSoft applications, which include HCM, ELM, and finance.
That's a lot of PeopleSoft. Very good. Okay. We'll skip the lady there. That she's actually, this is Doris Wong. Actually, she's with Smart ERP. But I'll introduce her. She's the CEO, and she has a long background with PeopleSoft. You may have known her before she was the general manager at Oracle, running the PeopleSoft business there. If I could have you introduce yourself, please.
Janice Yates, I'm with Red Lobster. We're on 9.1. We'll be starting our upgrade to 9.2 this year, and we're on HR, payroll for North America, then admin.
Very good. So that's a commercial kind of industry application. Very good. Over here, please.
Patricia Bonds. I'm with the National Finance Center here in New Orleans, part of USDA, and we're on PeopleSoft 9.0 HCM, and we're planning to move to 9.2 HCM and payroll.
Very good. Okay, that's another public sector environment, right? If you would, please.
Yes, I'm Mark. I work with Pat here, also at the National Finance Center for USDA here in New Orleans.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your intros. That gives us a feel a little about where you're coming from, and I think then in particular there are a number of public sector, government, federal in particular, organizations here, and so some of the federal government use cases I'll mention here, I think will kind of apply. So let's jump into it, and this is kind of I'm going to give you really it's like the ending of the movie right here on this slide, and introduce really what we term alternate architectures. Okay, kind of defining it. The big database that we have in this slide here kind of represents the core PeopleSoft application database that you might have. So it might be HCM, might be financials, it could even be, say, like a learning management, what have you. Architecturally, it doesn't really matter. The little database in front, and I'm not sure how readily you can see it there in the back, we depicted it with a little bit of a shadow kind of underneath, and we kind of term that as being the shadow database that might sit out in front of your core application database. And so it is actually logically and physically a separate database. And in so doing, that allows us to enhance scalability, enhance security in ways that I'll go into shortly. And that's, as it turns out, not the only thing you can do by leveraging this type of architecture. I'll go into a little bit more about some of the details as we go into the presentation, but I think a lot of it will kind of become evident when we go through some of the use cases that kind of got us here and drove us here. Some of the benefits of using these shadow databases. It provides some independence between the core application database and the rest of the system that might need enhanced security, enhanced scalability. Okay, so you get independence from the actual application database. And again, it doesn't really matter whether it's a financials or HCM database. So some examples are perhaps you might need a separate, more rigorous authentication scheme mechanism, perhaps the directory related, if it's an LDAP or what have you, additional authentication mechanisms, multi-factor authentication. Many organizations, as they start to roll out some pieces of their PeopleSoft application, to the internet access, very common in PeopleSoft on the HR side to have perhaps the recruiting solution. If you're using TAM Candidate Gateway, for many, that becomes the first PeopleSoft application that gets actually accessed outside your firewall, outside the four walls, okay? Other examples might be sometimes in the HR space that actually we'll go into are mechanisms where you want someone that isn't yet an employee to start to utilize some functionality, like perhaps onboarding. We'll see that in some of the examples here. CAPTCHA is just like another mechanism for authenticating as well. You see those funny like figures, graphic, or you have to type in this address that's in a picture or something like that to give you an extra added secure feeling that you're not a robot, right? You're actually a human. You can read that little picture that has the numbers on it for using, higher authentication type of environment. Another one more recently is you'll find that with 9.2, and I understand through the introductions there might be a number of you that your organizations are on a previous release and you're moving to 9.2 in the near future, perhaps. And the new mechanism for, I termed it here, for the PeopleSoft Update Manager, that selective adoption process, where you can now, starting in 9.2, pick and choose what aspects of the new image release that's coming in a PUM that you want to select and only implement that part into your environment. What we mean here, one of the benefits as a shadow database that you can utilize is that you can gain independence from a PUM. You might have some requirements, okay, that a particular image in a PUM needs, and you cannot or do not want to meet those prerequisites for one reason or another. But you do want the functionality that requires that. So I'll go into that example a little bit more further in the presentation. And also, as mentioned, there's certainly other kind of security as well as scalability benefits that you can gain from that. Overall, when you are looking to enhance your security or scalability, like any effort, it's better if you have a kind of a smaller target upon which or that you need to apply security or scalability, as opposed to having to apply that other higher, more rigorous security or scalability environment to your entire application. Okay, so for instance, in the example I mentioned earlier, say for recruiting, you're using TAM Candidate Gateway, and you want that to be more secure because now you're going to have the entire world able to hit some URLs for that PeopleSoft piece, right, for that recruiting piece. Does that mean, do you want to have enhanced security for your entire HCM database along with that? No, it's much easier, much more effective, less costly as well, to just apply that enhanced security on that particular TAM Candidate Gateway piece. So you'll see that theme kind of recurring as we go through in the presentation. All right, so let me jump into it a little bit more in particular for use cases for using these alternate architectures with that kind of shadow database. And you'll see a little bit more, hopefully, about what we mean, how the shadow database actually works here. So these use cases, they're in currently live production use. We'll cover a couple federal government examples and a commercial example as well. So here's the first example here. Again, the big database is kind of your core. In this case, it's a core HR database, HCM database. And we have the little shadow guy out front. And in this instance, the shadow database, okay, is front-ending an automated employee onboarding solution. It's actually a Smart ERP's solution. It's a PeopleSoft-based add-on solution to automate the entire new hire process, or bringing on new employees, what forms they should see, in what order, and that sort of thing, okay? That was the use case here. And again, as mentioned, the shadow database is actually logically and physically separate from the rest of the database. And the driver for that, okay, is to enhance security. This federal organization is I won't tell you their name, but it's a department, and they have a large department of federal government that has a global presence, okay? And they have a lot of new hire forms that are very, very, very complicated, and the info in their HR database, everyone's HR database has sensitive info, right? But this organization is very, very highly sensitive. This is I'll give you a hint, organization whose secretary, whose former secretary is actually now the presumptive candidate for the Democratic Party presidential race, okay? That's this department here. So for their automated employee onboarding for this department, they did not want to have that piece that exposes the new hire process over the internet directly in the same HR database, okay? So they wanted to have an enhanced security environment just for that onboarding piece. They're not opening up their entire HR application over the internet. They're just opening up that new hire process, okay, for the new employees that are coming on board. So the next slide here, go into a little bit about their architecture, and you'll see some of the benefits that you can gain from using an alternate architecture to enhance security. Let me explain the boxes here. I'm sure that some of them are kind of hard to read in the back. Up in the top right there, that quadrant, that's kind of the core HCM database, okay, in the back end there. And out in front, separated by firewalls and such, down towards the lower part of the graphic here. This is the front end, this is the shadow database, okay, out front. Again, the use case here, the shadow database is hosting the smart employee onboarding for the new hires. And you can see that they have extra added security with a number of different firewalls and such out in front. Here is where the public DMZ is, and that's through which the new hires start to log in to the system when they come aboard to this department and start to fill out their paperwork, okay? And it's all done digitally, online, so that they don't actually have to have a physical piece of paper. An example might be an I-9, right? Rather than having to fill out an I-9 and sign your name 20 times on a bunch of different forms, whatever, the system will automate the population and presentation of each one of those new hire forms. So the idea is that you may be at home in your living room or logging in elsewhere, and you can start your new hire process, okay, before you, say, go to show up to work the first day in the office. So the way the shadow database works, the use case scenario here is bring a new employee on board. So the process actually picks up when a candidate has been presented with an offer, and then now that candidate has accepted. Okay, so they're starting their process, and as you know, for many of you that work with federal government, there are a lot of forms and there are background checks and things like that. All those get kicked off from this process. And the way you gain additional security in this environment is that once all of the paperwork has been completed for a particular new hire, okay, only then, from the back-end host system, back-end HCM database, only then a mechanism reaches out from the back and pulls the new hire information from the shadow database, okay, that's doing the automated employee onboarding, and then adds that new employee to the core HCM database as a new employee, okay? Only then. And as soon as that occurs as well, actually the information for that new hire gets deleted and removed from the shadow system. So the benefits that you gain from a security perspective, as mentioned, this environment, you want to be very, very highly secure, right? And so you can kind of throw all of your security mechanisms only to this portion, this piece, the shadow database, right? You are not applying all that extra added security layers to your entire HCM database. And with that separation too, should something occur and you might get hacked on this front end, because that's the part that's exposed, you have limited exposure because it's only information surrounding those new hires that are currently in the process of filling out their paperwork. It's not your entire HR database. Okay, so that's kind of the benefit that you gain there, and that was the driver for using a shadow database in this architecture. And when we were employing this automated employee onboarding solution, we didn't come up with this idea. It was this department's concern with the security. They said, hey, can't we just put this separate and then put the smart employee onboarding piece out in the DMC to affect that new hire process, and in that way we get the functionality without having to expose your entire HCM database to over the internet too. And I'll tell you a story as well, that when we have completed the effort for this project here, it's all ready to go to turn on the new hire employee onboarding piece. We're very excited. It's great to have new employees of this department get added with this automated system, paperless and all that. And we hear nothing. We've gone through all this testing, all the development, and when are you going to turn it on? And we hear nothing. Months and months and months and months and months go on, nothing, right? We're starting to get worried. Did they find some issue that we all missed, and now they don't want to use this system? But as we find out later through the news and everything, like everyone else did, right? The OPM got hacked, and so that's the Office of Personnel Management, where everyone's security clearances are done through for all employees of the government. That right? They got hacked, and indications are, I don't know if there's actually been real proof of it, but indications are it was kind of based from Chinese hackers and the like. So what was going on evidently is that with that hack, before they turned on and opened up the new hire onboarding process for this department, because of that hack, they wanted to take an extra look at some of the other security environment that they have on here. So you can see the benefit of those extra added security mechanisms then can be targeting just this piece, shadow database, not your entire HCM database. Okay, so hopefully that kind of makes sense for you. Another use case we can go through in the federal government space, again. This is, again, the same shadow database as the little guy kind of out front, and also, again, the application functionality that they're hosting on the front end shadow database is an employee onboarding solution again. And once again, in addition to security that the physical and logical separation provides you, it's also added scalability. Okay, this organization, again, I won't mention, they have over 5 million job applications, okay, for hiring, as it turns out, over 1 million people. And they're going to hire over 1 million people within a single year, in about a year. I think it's like 1.2 million. And they're going to do E-Verify, right? Most of you are familiar with the DHS E-Verify process solution to do employment eligibility and that sort of thing. So they do E-Verify for all those. That's just huge volumes right? That's like a million a month. I mean, right? Take that back. 100,000 a month gives you about 1.2. And actually, it turns out that would be kind of easy if it was 100,000 a month. In fact, most of their hires are going to occur in about a 30-day period, almost like 700,000. So, we're talking really, really high scalability kind of requirements. This is an organization that they don't always hire 1 million people a year, but every 10 years, this organization has to hire 1 million people, to give you an idea maybe who they are. And so the driver here being extreme high volume, as well as a secure environment. And they deploy a similar shadow database architecture for that automated employee onboarding. It's essentially the same as the previous kind of use case, but the driver wasn't just security there, the driver was scalability. So in this type of architecture as well, as the system starts to get rolled out and tested, what this allows you to do is to move that and adjust the architecture of the shadow database part into different hosting environments and such to test out the scalability and all that. And again, you're just applying all that high volume. They have that big iron anticipated to be able to support those kinds of volumes. You're supporting it just for the onboarding process, the onboarding functionality, not the entire HCM database. So you gain some efficiencies that way, and enhance security, enhance scalability. Largely kind of similar to the previous example in the federal government as well, but in this case, high volume, okay? A little bit more about this use of the alternate architecture in this government environment here is just to show you. I won't go into much detail on this slide here. It's kind of hard to see, but largely that there's some additional kind of authentication mechanism that they wanted to deploy, and so this architecture readily allows you to apply that additional kind of identity. They use NetIQ. Okay, it's kind of an identity management provider. It allows you to apply that extra added authentication, those mechanisms, just to that piece, just to the new hire employee onboarding piece. You don't have to apply it to your entire HR database. Okay, and let me go to the next one here. The next use case, this is a commercial staffing organization, as it turns out, and their kind of environment here is that they have a number of shared systems, okay, shared services, in addition to their PeopleSoft HCM, including other PeopleSoft and non-PeopleSoft. And so the shadow database kind of enables them to sit out in the front. Again, it's an employee onboarding solution that they host out front that needs to kind of share through some of the other systems. And the driver there, like the previous example, the physical and logical separation provides them scalability, okay, to enhance their scalability. Because this is an organization that they, because they're in the staffing industry, they're actually hiring a lot of employees on behalf of their clients. Okay, these are organizations that perhaps get busy at certain times of year, like retailers. During the holiday season, retailers hire a lot of employees, so this staffing firm helps staff those organizations during the holiday period. So there's, like, say, UPS drivers, right? You have to hire a lot of UPS drivers in order to deliver all the packages and things like that. So their volumes are pretty high. It's not like that other agency that we saw, but 10,000, a month plus, up to 300,000 a year new hires And many of them, not all of them, many of them, I think about 25,000 right now, are using E-Verify. So they use our Smart ERP's E-Verify solution for PeopleSoft to E-Verify all of those organizations there. I'll mention as well that for E-Verify, PeopleSoft does not, the application itself does not have a E-Verify integration, right? And we understand there are no plans to have that E-Verify integration. So Smart ERP, in concert with Oracle, we developed the E-Verify solution, add-on solution for PeopleSoft, and it's the first and only E-Verify solution for PeopleSoft that has gone through Oracle's validated integration process there. So the use case here, architecture is very similar, but there are some additional kind of systems, shared systems that this organization wanted to kind of separate from the shadow data so that they can now leverage that onboarding functionality and apply their scalability enhancements in terms of the environment, the big iron that's required to be able to support those levels of volumes for new hires. They can apply that just to the onboarding piece, right? Not the entire HCM database, not all these other shared systems as well. Pulling the thread a little bit more on this staffing use case here, largely you can see one of the other systems that they have back to their applicant tracking system, and they have some like other kind of front office type functionality. But again, those are just some of the examples of the shared services, again, that's tied with the HR as well. So some other use cases for the same alternate architecture you can think of. Another one is in version compatibility. An example I'll go through is there was a situation where an organization wanted to leverage some features of a current version of PeopleTools. Namely, you guys are familiar with the user interface, the fluid user interface, right? With the contemporary user interface, with the tiles and that sort of thing. There's a requirement, right? You need PeopleTools 854 was the first, I think. And so the organization, they wanted to leverage and start to utilize the user interface there for mobile reasons, for the users that want to use the access the system via mobile devices, iPad and phones and the like. But they had an incompatibility with the requirement where for PeopleTools 854, turns out their identity management system that they did use with their PeopleSoft was incompatible. There was a platform incompatibility with 854, but they wanted to use the fluid features. So what you can do then is you can have a separate instance out in the shadow database that's hosting the part of the functionality of the application that you want to fluid enable or take advantage of the fluidity, if you will, right? So rather than trying to get the entire HCM database upgraded to PeopleTools 854, which would require their IBM also to be either changed out or you'd have to wait until it is compatible with 854. You put that piece, a fluid-enabled piece of the HR functionality that you want, you host just that piece in the shadow database. And you have that piece there run PeopleTools 854. That's fluid-enabled, right? So you are gaining, you're kind of getting around, it's kind of a workaround for that incompatibility in your environment. And many organizations run into a similar type of situation that there's a prerequisite in, say, the environment PeopleTools needs. Maybe your hardware OS server platform is not yet certified. It's incompatible with the new version of PeopleTools. So you can use the same alternate architecture approach and mechanism to alleviate that type of thing. And then when and if the thing stars align, right? Your IDM is now compatible with your tools, people tools, environments. You can just undo that shadow database, and then it'll all keep working. As I mentioned before, that it was in particular what they were looking for was the fluid interface for 854, and now 855 is out as well. Another use case, as it turns out, for an alternate architecture is kind of cloud related, cloud enabled. So remember I mentioned, I think it was in the first federal government use case that I covered. It wasn't our idea when we were deploying the solution there, the onboarding solution, to say, hey, put it on this shadow database thing and you can enhance the security. We work with the client on that. But in so doing, by having just that onboarding piece in the shadow database, we at Smart ERP, what we realized, by having the shadow database only host the onboarding piece, what we've done is we've separated that onboarding functionality from PeopleSoft, from the PeopleSoft HR database on the back end, right? On the initial use case, I showed you how when a new hire's paperwork is completed, the back end database reaches out, grabs all the new hire information, and pulls it into the core HR system. So it's very separate. So to us, we said, well, we can do automated employee onboarding then in the same fashion for other than PeopleSoft applications. So through those efforts initially that we worked with that organization to do that shadow database for employee onboarding, Smart ERP delivers also cloud onboarding using essentially this architecture, and allows us to do automated employee onboarding via cloud deployment for EBS, JDI groups, ADP. If you go to the ADP marketplace, Smart onboarding there is a cloud delivery in the cloud marketplace for ADP, and it's leveraging this, essentially leveraging the same cloud architecture. Okay, so that's just another use case there. Going on, I wanted just to touch upon a couple of some examples of some screenshots that are used in a variety of the use cases I show you. This is just kind of an additional authentication screen that's presented, again, just for that piece for the new hire onboarding. Your entire HCM database now doesn't have to go through the same mechanism. This is kind of hard to see too, but this is some of the mechanism for doing the initial authentication. They'll call you back or text you with this code, right? That sort of thing. What I'll close with is some of the ways you can actually affect that integration between the shadow database and the backend database. Include some of the usual mechanism in PeopleSoft, provided by PeopleSoft. Integration broker and web services are the typical ones, but largely in some of the examples that I showed you, we're using database links. If you're not familiar with those, it's analogous to in a PeopleSoft transaction, when the app server conducts the transaction, it interfaces with the database directly, okay, whether it's Oracle or Microsoft or what have you. Rather than interfacing with the database directly, what a link do is almost like a one-hop. You think you're hitting the database right next to you, but you've actually pointed it, one layer of indirection, pointed it elsewhere. That's a mechanism that we've used to deploy that shadow database. So it's analogous to just an app server making a direct call to the database, but it's just kind of a one-hop. And the application itself doesn't really know that it's not updating the exact database there. That's what a database link is anyway. But the other standard PeopleSoft mechanisms, such as integration broker for messaging and web services, work as well. So to kind of close and summarize, the concept of that shadow database as an alternate architecture is really, really simple. The idea is very simple, but it's quite powerful. The effect it can have in terms of, as identified, enhancing security, enhancing scalability. It allows you to, as one of the examples I showed, you can enhance usability, change the user experience just on some portion of your application by having it separate in the hosted, from the shadow database part, and also went through how maybe even for gaining some independence on some requirement, compatibility requirements, such as like a people tools prerequisite for 854 or 855. You can get around that. We mentioned the PUM updates as well. One PUM feature might require some additional environment upgrade, OS or what have you. If you really want that feature, you could perhaps host it in your shadow database and then only upgrade that environment to a current OS or database or what have you. And I also went through some of the certainly other security and footprint benefits that you can gain from having a shadow database. So with that, if there are any questions, just let me know, raise your hand now, but by and large, hopefully you can kind of imagine in your own environments then any applications of using a shadow database for meeting some requirements in your organization, whether it's just for your HCM that you might be using, but it also works the same similar if you also have financials. You might do something similar. Perhaps you want to roll out some of the supplier onboarding type things, vendor related things, rather than exposing your entire financials database out over the internet. You might take that supplier piece that you want to expose and put that in a shadow database, and you're doing the same thing but in a different environment, different use case for financials, and it's really just it's kind of a testament to the PeopleSoft architecture, the way it's put together, built on people tools, and then you can, with the same set of people tools, you can develop different applications. Really what we're doing here, we're leveraging in the people tools architecture, there's a SAM layer, and as soon as I said, I would say, well, I can't remember what it stands for, but basically it's that section where that makes the database call. Okay, so that what it allows you to do is that there can be some separation of where that database call makes. Right, you can use a database link and link over not to the database that's in your host environment, but maybe to a shadow database. That we're kind of leveraging the architecture within People Tools to be able to affect these enhanced scalability and enhanced security environments. So with that, if there are any questions, let us know, and my email as well is